Morning. It's good to be with you this morning. Give me about 30 seconds to a minute and I'll get into the lesson. Just want to say that I'm a softie and a sentimentalist, so forgive me, but I'm just very touched to see everyone here this morning. Lots of faces mean a lot to me, and it's just really good to be home. Just fills my heart with a lot of warmth, and there's a lot of love in this little congregation, a lot of love in all these people. Just mean the world to me. If I'd have known months to a year ago where I'd be today, makes you appreciate what God can do for you and your life. I've grown my family, my close family now is those in White Bluff in Tennessee with my fiance and their family, and continue to grow my church family there. God has been really good to me, and so I'm so grateful for all of your love and for your support. Continue to keep me in your prayers. I have till next year. Still got school to go. Still got a wedding coming up, and life is good, though. God has been really good to me, but I continue to need your prayers to remain strong and to hold fast. So thank you for that minute. Now let's get into our lesson. Faith and finances. How many of us struggle with money? Do matters of money cause problems in your marriages? I want us to talk about this morning, kind of wrestle with this topic. According to an article published by Ramsey Solutions titled, "Money Ruining Marriages in America," the number one issues couples fought about, which is a topic they didn't want to talk about, which was money. And they did a study of 1,000 U.S. adults and discovered that those with larger amounts of debt, that was the main area that they argued over, was money. Dave Ramsey, the CEO of Ramsey Solutions, and personal finance personality, radio show host, author, and businessman, he spends a great deal of time helping people with their money problems and with their finances, but his main goal is to help people to not be enslaved by debt. We think about a quote that he talks about. He says this: "Earning a lot of money is not the key to prosperity, but how you handle it is." And in this manner, we would agree with him. We would say that how we handle our money is extremely important. The emphasis is handling our money in a way that, while it is physical, there's also a great spiritual element to it. We think about Luke 12:48. "To whom much is given, much is required." We have a great blessing and a tremendous obligation to be careful with what God has blessed us. So I want us to consider the questions of what does the Bible say concerning what is right and what is wrong concerning money. So this morning we're going to dive into 3 areas of finances. We're going to talk about giving, we're going to talk about saving, and we're going to talk about spending. And we want to dive into the text, notice passages from both the Old Testament and from the New Testament, and sort out what does the Bible say is right and wrong in these different areas. Notice 1 Chronicles chapter 29. If you have your Bibles, I invite you to turn there. First, when we evaluate how we handle God's money, the first thing we need to do is that our mind should go to God in everything, but we should think about God because he's given us everything. Everything that we possess is because of him. Notice what the text says. "Yours, O Lord, is the greatness and the power and the glory and the victory and the majesty, indeed everything that is in the heavens and the earth. Yours is the dominion, O Lord, and you exalt yourself as head over all. Both riches and honor come from you, and you rule over all. And in your hand is power and might, and it lies in your hand to make great and to strengthen everyone. Now, therefore, our God, we thank you and praise your glorious name. But who am I and who are my people that we should be able to offer as generously as this? For all things come from you, and from your hand we have given from you." Let's move down to verse 17. "Since I know, O my God, that you try the heart and delight in uprightness, I, in the integrity of my heart, have willingly offered all these things. So now with joy I have seen your people who are present make their offerings willingly to you." David's prayer here focuses on the greatness of God. He's focusing on this high esteem and honor of all that God has done. And he recognizes that when we give back to God, we're giving him that which he has already given to us. And in verse 17, he gets to the crux of the matter. He says, the heart. The heart is what is important. That God does not desire the material possessions, but he desires the heart. David offers his heart to God in desire to conform to his standards. And the people follow suit. And in the process of trying to give back and give the people, they're giving voluntarily a desire to offer to God what he is due willingly, and in so doing they give their hearts fully to God. Once the heart is at the right point, that's what we want to get to. David's saying, I know that everything I have is because of you. So I'm giving you really all that I can is what you really desire is the heart. I'm giving that to you. That's the foundation. The foundation where we want to start is your heart. Then we know that the heart is the starting point, but what comes next? Well, there's an obligation to offer back to God the best. It's both required and expected, because once the heart is right, we give back. And in the Old Testament, this principle would have called giving of the first fruits. So I want us to notice three passages that talk about this. Notice Genesis chapter 4, verses 3 through 5, which reads as following. Abel on his part also brought of the firstlings of his flock and of their fat portions. And the Lord had regarded for Abel and for his offering. Notice that the text bears out that Abel brought to God the firstling, which is the first offspring that came forth in the birth order, showing that God was given both the first and the best, not the worst and the last. Additionally, the Israelites were commanded in Leviticus 23 and verse 10 to give of the first fruits to the priest, to take care of them, which is also could be considered offering for the Lord because these are his priests. And finally, the proverb writer would state this, that we're to give first of all of our produce from our wealth, that we are to give the first of it. It reads as this, though, honor the Lord from your wealth and from the first of all your produce, so your barns will be filled with plenty, and your vats will overflow with new wine. Gifting the God of first of all we had correlates to this, that one can prosper, but the text does not say that it is that if you give, you'll always prosper. The text bears out this, that if you put God first, he'll take care of you. That is the principle that the proverb writer gives. Now, we've established a foundation of this. The heart is important. Where your heart is. Giving back first is important. Now that we've got the foundation, I want us to actually bear into the topic about what is right and what is wrong concerning this. Let's examine a few passages. We've seen what the Old Testament has to say. Let's look over to the New Testament. 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 6 through 8. Now this I say, he who sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and he who sows bountifully will reap bountifully. Each one must do just as he is purposed, as you've chosen for oneself to do, in his heart, not grudgingly, not out of a pain or of a sorrow, not under compulsion, not this pressure, this idea that I feel obligated, that I have to, out of distress, out of necessity. That's not what he's saying. As if you are giving in this idea that we feel like because we just have to. That's not what he wants from us. But he wants us not out of a requirement, but he loves a cheerful giver. He wants us to do it with the right heart. And verse 8, and God is able to make all grace abound to you, so that always, having all sufficiency in everything, you may have an abundance of every good deed. Bob Winton in his commentary said this, our contribution is not to be made from an attitude of necessity. A robber could get up to us and he would try to take our hard-earned money by threatening us with a weapon. He might ask us to give him his money, and we might quickly hand it over to him. But we only did it under duress. We could not have given it without coercion if there was a gun involved. And additionally about this passage, he brings out another valuable point. He says our contribution is not tithing. Tithing belongs to the Old Testament. It was never made a part of the New Testament order. If tithing had been in effect, the principles of 2 Corinthians 8 and 9 would not have been given. We would be required to give a flat 10% of our income. Giving would not be based on as God hath prospered. Based on this passage, it's clear that the right thing to do is to give to God as we have prospered. We give it happily. We give it because we want to. Where's the heart of the matter? The text makes it equally clear, though, that this isn't a grudging mentality that we have. Not this obligation, not this pressure, as we've said, but it's not backed by the Bible to do it that way. Because what purpose would it serve to give to God because we feel like we have to? It's just, God, we know you expect this, so here you go. He said, I don't need your money. So that can't be the point. The point is this: where's your heart? Purpose in his heart. God wants to get to this. There's the heart involved. Because what are our lives revolved around? Money. It makes the world go round, as we say. So God knew we were going to be all wrapped up in this. So guess what? If we're all wrapped up in the money, but our heart's all wrapped up in God, they correlate. We give back. God knows our heart's in the right place. Let's look at some more rights and wrongs. When we think about what is the right or wrong concerning how much one gives, I want us to notice an Old Testament principle of tithing. Tithing is a 10th part or 10%. So we notice passages like this as they were commanded to do in the Old Testament. Leviticus 27 and verse 30. Thus, all the tithe of the land, seed, fruit of the tree is the Lord's. Deuteronomy 12, 5 through 6. 10th part of your goods and offerings to be lifted up to the Lord. There's clearly provided this principle of giving back of the 10% of what God had allowed them to have. But it's clearly that principle for the Old Testament. What about for today? Being no longer under this old law, what are we required to give? What is our obligation? Because the New Testament doesn't give a set amount. It doesn't say you have to give 10%. But here's what it does say. We're to give as we have purposed in our heart. Or further as it adds, we're to give as we've prospered in 1 Corinthians 16 and verse 2. Taking all of this into account, what's the right amount to give? A good start would be 10%. It's not a tithe. It's not because of an obligation that we have to give a set amount, but it's because it's an easy mathematical number. It becomes very easy for those that as they're trying to make their budget, they can say, I'll take 10% of what I make a month and I'm going to give that back to God. But there should be a desire that we go above and beyond this principle. Not a desire under. You have an old covenant law that is now becoming inferior and old. So therefore, we could take this principle that giving above and beyond that, we're not trying to go below that, we're trying to exceed that. As an example, if you were to have a good month and you were to say that I've earned a lot this month, I'm doing really good, I got some overtime, things are going great, I'm in a great financial situation. Well, we are giving as we've prospered. We then take and we say, I can evaluate, and I say, I have this much, and this is how much I'm going to give back. Say you have a month that's not as good, you don't work the overtime, and you don't do as good, well, I might not be able to give as much this month. You have that point of, you reach an evaluation. So you have a general evaluation. You say, well, I can at least start with 10%. Then if every time you make money, you take a conscious evaluation. Here's where I'm at. And then one last point I want us to notice about some guides to giving is that you can push the envelope. There's this idea that you can go above and beyond. We think about the widow who gave all that she had in Mark chapter 12, 41 through 44. Or we think about the churches of Macedonia that gave beyond their ability in 2 Corinthians 8, 1 through 3. Now, what the scriptures would not suggest is that we have to put ourselves in the poorhouse. They would not suggest that we, have to put ourselves in a state of poverty and out on the street because we give so much. But they would suggest this, that sometimes we can give more than we think we can. Sometimes when all is said and done, we look at ourselves and we say, I could be giving more. I could probably give a little more. There's probably some area, I really don't have to have this. I can probably give it here. There's an idea where contentment, where we're just set with the same thing every time. And we never look at it. We never examine the big picture of our lives. And we never say, I can give more. After all, think about Jesus who gave it all. We think about what he did. He wasn't content with just a little bit. It wasn't just a 10%. That's what he felt obligated to do. Jesus said, here's all I can give you is this amount. He gave it all. So always be trying to push the envelope. in giving, Jesus should be the Lord of our wallets. So what I give from my wallet demonstrates my heart. Because God's priority is not the amount that we give. What he's really concerned, what he's really trying to point out about giving, the crux of the whole matter is this: the heart. Where's the heart? Your attitude when you examine how much money I bring in a month, how much I'm willing to give back. God has a clear indication where our hearts are at. Saving. What is right and what is wrong? As we consider managing our finances, there must be a consideration given to saving money. The Bible usually talks about saving, but it generally does it in a negative light. We think about, don't store up for yourselves treasures on earth. Think about these principles, and we're told to be afraid of. It's hard to get into heaven if you're too rich. We think about what the Bible has to say, but scriptural insight would allow us to realize that while it does warn us, while it does caution us, there are still principles of saving. Notice Genesis, what it talks about. We're going to notice that. Because most of us today realize that we have stuff. We have cars. We have houses. We have boats. Whatever we have, or major other purchases. And most people have some form of retirement. They have some form of savings for important things that they need. And while these don't apply directly to the Bible, the principles are there. Notice in verse 34 of Genesis 41. Let Pharaoh take action to appoint overseers in charge of the land, and let him exact a fifth of the produce of the land of Egypt in the 7 years of abundance. Then let them gather all the food of these good years that are coming, and store up the grain for food in the cities under Pharaoh's authority, and let them guard it. Let the food become as a reserve for the land for 7 years of famine, which will occur in the land of Egypt, so that the land will not perish during the famine. Now the proposal seemed good to Pharaoh and to all his servants. In the context of this passage, Joseph has told Pharaoh, here's what I recommend you do. You know, we're going to have some good years. We're going to have 7 good years. And then we're going to have 7 bad years. And here's what I would tell you to do. I would tell you of the good years that you have, when things are going right, as we would say, in your best years of making money, when you're working the good job, you got good overtime, whatever it is, and your financial situation is good. This is the same correlation Joseph's making. While the abundance is there, while the harvest is there, set some back, because you know what lies ahead. There's times when you're not going to have as much. So there's a clear indication. The Bible doesn't say it's wrong in every case to save, to put away. We think about an emergency fund. As the name would suggest, it's there for a case of emergency. When, as you're driving along the road, and all of a sudden, the tire goes flat. Well, you need a mode of transportation. So what do? You have that emergency fund for this particular emergency. You get the tire fixed with the money that you have, and you're on the road again. There's a principle that by saving aside, you've got a portion in which to take care of you for those times of emergency. And that's exactly what the text in Genesis would bear out. Let's notice Proverbs 21 and verse 20. There is precious treasure and oil in the dwelling of the wise, but a foolish man swallows it up. This phrase, a precious treasure and an oil, it's found in the house of the wise. So the text would bear out that out of the abundance, out of what this man has been blessed with and allowed, not that he selfishly was seeking this stuff and selfishly seeking this wealth, but that it was there. He had it out of an abundance. It was stored up in his house. And it contrasts this to the foolish person who swallows it up. It's this idea of, you've seen those people that as soon, it's like there's a burnt hole in the pocket. It seems like as soon as the money goes in, it goes out. It engulfs them. As soon as they got it, they spend it. And he's engulfing all its money. He's taking it in and he's spending it. That's why he has nothing in his dwelling. He has nothing put aside. It provides 2 valuable insights in this passage on the subject of wealth. First, notice he refers to one that gathers in Proverbs 13:11, that wealth obtained by fraud, that possibly greedy sense, but then it dwindles, but the one who gathers by labor increases it. So if you think about that, there's 2 valuable insights to this. First, notice the person who gathers it is showing that a person who works is worthy of his wages. We think about 1 Timothy 5 and verse 18. Think about the preacher is worthy of his wages. The ox as he references there, the person that works, he's worthy of what he gets. If the ox works, he's worthy of that rest that he deserves. So there's the principle there. And second, notice that as a result of his hard work, wealth begins to increase. And the evidence is provided to make it clear that there's a biblical example of saving money. As we've prospered, as we've worked, it's going to transpire that way. But it remains, the question is this. What about what the Bible says in Matthew chapter 6? How do we wrestle with this passage? Doesn't it teach against saving? Doesn't it provide a clear indication that that's not what we're supposed to do? Because it clearly says, don't store up for yourselves treasures on earth. Why? Because that's where moth and rust destroy and thieves break in and steal. But store it for yourselves where? Treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, where thieves do not break in and steal. Why? For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. I want us to notice that contextually in this passage, Jesus is talking to the Pharisees. And he's talking about their views of how God operated. They believe that in their righteous status before God, that he looked upon them and he was blessing them with wealth, and therefore they were righteous. That is their perceived view. So they had this wrong view about money and about wealth. And Jesus here is trying to get them that they're focusing on the wrong perspective. In their eyes, wealth from God was the blessing because of his love for them. And Jesus points out that you don't store up for yourselves treasures on earth. In contrast to the Pharisees, who were so focused on the outward appearance, on their wealth, on everything they had to offer. But Jesus would point them back to the importance of it all. If you want to see true righteousness, a person that is in a truly right state with God, store for yourselves treasures in heaven. In contrast to material wealth, Jesus said it's better to focus and work on spiritual growth, not on the physical wealth. And the climax of his message can be seen in verse 24. No one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to one and despise the other. Why? Because you cannot serve God and wealth. What is most important is that we serve God and not our money. If money is what we strive for, it's what we sacrifice, it's what we put all our time and energy in, we'll work as long as we can, as much as we can, it's all consuming, everything is about money, 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 then we've traded it for God. Money and possessions are not deemed wrong. Notice that. They're not deemed wrong. Nowhere in Scripture does it say, you think of the wealth of Solomon. Are we really going to condemn Solomon, who God gave the wealth and the riches that he had? We would not suggest, and neither does the Bible, that it's wrong. We would suggest this, that it can become wrong when it takes priority over God. That's the crux of the matter. You can't serve two masters. Think God primary, money secondary. Money is important, but God's more important. So I say, if things ever flip, that's when we have a problem. Notice another passage. 1 Timothy 6, 17 through 19. Instruct those who are rich in this present world not to be conceited or to fix their hope on the uncertainty of riches, but on God, who richly supplies us with all things to enjoy. Instruct them to do good, to be rich in good works, and to be generous and ready to share, storing up for themselves the treasures of a good foundation for the future, so that they may take hold of that which is life indeed. The focus of his message and the passage here is living a life focused on the good works. It doesn't say that it's wrong to be rich. What it says is it's warning against being so consumed by it, because we see that everything we have is because of God, and it's a privilege that he allows us to have money. It's a privilege that he allows us to be blessed, because if it were not for God, we would end up with nothing. We would have nothing. So it's something we allow. So what he would say is, don't abuse the privilege. And when saving money, there's a proper attitude. Notice what every text is born out. It's not this idea of greediness. It's not this idea that we hoard it up and it's mine, and we picture the Scrooge. We picture the guy that's got all the money sitting in his little office as you just huddled around it. That's not the picture that we're supposed to have. But we lay up wisely and generously and take care. The proverb writer we're talking about is blessed for a man who saves up for his children's children and takes care of them. There's the principle. But be ready to do good works. That's the priority. We think of that example as we talked about it, saving up for retirement. That's a principle we found in Genesis, or of one of saving in order to give back. But there are a few other reasons that saving God can be really important, and that we always strive to do what is best ultimately for us and for our relationship with God. Again, every matter of money goes back to the heart. Where is your heart in this matter? Spending. What is right and what is wrong? This can be a hard one to wrestle with. We can understand biblically the two principles of we give from the heart, we give as we have purposed. God would suggest that we do that. It's commanded. We understand saving. We understand that there's a good general biblical principle. What about spending? Warren Buffett said this: do not save what is left after spending, but spend what is left after saving. After setting aside our money for God first, and then after saving up for a portion of our earnings, then the last step, the last on the priority of importances, is spending. It can be evident that God blesses us with a lot. We think about where we live, the United States of America, and everything that this nation and country has been blessed with. It's clear to see that those in the Old Testament, they used money. They would have traded and they would have sold things and they would have done everything that they needed to do to live, to operate, and to function. We think about Solomon and his wealth, and we think about how he spent it on the capital and he spent it on the temple and on God's holy worship place. There is an allowance by God, clearly, to spend money. Why? Because God knew the principles of this. He knew that man's supposed to work. It's commanded. It's biblical. A man is supposed to work. Well, God knew if you work, then you're going to have money. And he also knew that for life to function and revolve around, money would have to be spent. So we want to notice a few things about this. Notice Proverbs 22 and verse 7. The rich rules over the poor, and the borrower becomes the lender's slave. So in spending money, the proverb writer would suggest this. And what should come to mind is that we need to be careful not to be slaves to those we owe money to. If we take on too much debt, we quickly become a slave. Because what will happen is this. You will find it happening especially to young people where, like we said, there's a burning hole in the pocket. It happens to them quite often. They're so consumed because they've spent way beyond their means. You notice they're not there Sunday night. They're not there Wednesday night. They start missing Sunday morning. It has become their master. They have to work and keep working and keep working and keep working. Why? Because they have overspent what God has blessed them with. They have foolishly squandered their money, and now their slave master owns them. Proverb writer would be careful of this. Why? Because guess what? You cannot serve two masters. And when you have over-abused the privilege, you have then by default gain a new master that you did not want. So we must be mindful of this. Notice Luke 12 and verse 15 as we think about wrestling with this idea of spending. Then he said to them, beware and be on your guard against every form of greed. For not even when one has an abundance does his life consist of his possessions. So while spending is important to life, and we know that we need things like food, transportation, and a roof over our head, we must be mindful to have balance. What he would suggest is this, is that if our life is just about the stuff and just about the possessions, what is life really about? Is it really worth it just for the stuff that's going to perish away? We have tragically missed the mark if we deem that this is all life is about. It's all about the money and it's all about the possessions. Our lives are to revolve around God, and that is what our life is to be all about. And that's what he would caution us there. Proverbs 10:4, this last passage, as we think about spending. Poor is he who works with a negligent hand, but the hand of the diligent makes rich. Working diligently is important. We would all encourage now more than ever, if you have been to a McDonald's drive-thru, that working diligently is really important. Working hard and appreciating that you have a job and you desire to work and to do it well. And because of that work, And that willingness, determination to have a good work ethic. You work and you're paid for your work. And your possessions do come in the form of stuff. You're going to have things. God in his infinite wisdom understood this. And he knew that we were going to have to do all these things. So riches and wealth, they may be tied to some of the things that we own. So while there are many other passages we could dive into, it's clear that God understands we're going to have to spend money. But it's important to be cautious when we do so. When we spend money, we must be mindful that our lives do not revolve around stuff. Not all about the things, but our possessions are secondary, as we've said, to God, who is the primary. As we think about money, there should be a great deal of spiritual thought and prayer in making financial decisions. Whether you are like Elon Musk, who according to USA Today has a net worth as of 2022 of a whopping $219 billion, making him the richest person in the world. Or if you are a single individual in the poverty level at around $13,000, no matter where you fall on the scale of wealth or lack thereof, there is an obligation on our part to manage money in accordance with God's will. Each individual and family should live in a way that shows that they live a life in service to God and not in service to money. Living a life not focused on our physical wealth, but one invested on our spiritual wealth. Morning that we've better understood the finances of our life. We've better understood our financial obligation to God. Our money that God has blessed us with. We examine it. First, remember, if you leave with anything, it's this: the heart. That's why all of this is important to begin with. Why would a preacher take a whole lesson to talk about money? Because it's all over the Bible. Why? Because God knew that everything to make the world goes round revolves around money. And it is so easy to make it the Lord of our lives and the master. God says, use it under me, for me. There's our priority. And that's what I want to leave us with this morning. Where are we at this morning, though, in our lives, as we think about really where our hearts are in general? Where is your heart, and where is it in relationship to God? Is he the Lord of your life? Is he the top priority? The reason you get out of bed in the morning, the reason you live life in the way in which you do, the way you conduct yourselves. Do people see exuding out of you? When you spend your money, do they notice that you live a life based on biblical principles? And have you become a Christian, desiring to live in subjection to God and to be in a right relationship with him? Heard the word, believed it, repented of your sins, and confessed the sweet name of Jesus, has been baptized into Christ. Most important for those that are Christians, have we evaluated ourselves? Where are we at this morning with our lives? What are we struggling with? And most importantly, where is our heart? And has money consumed us? Or has God consumed us? What is your need this morning? Come together, we stand and sing.